Hi there. That's the sound of today, and it belongs to one of the most fast-moving groups in the country, the Turtles.
And hold you tight, so happy together. If I should call you up, invest a dime, and you say you belong to me, and ease my mind. Imagine how the world could be so very fine, so happy together. I can't see me loving nobody but you for all my life. When you're with me, baby, the skies will be blue for all my life. You and me, no matter how they toss the dice, it had to be. The only one for me is you, and you for me, so happy together. I can't see me loving nobody but you for all my life. When you're with me, baby, the skies will be blue for all my life. Me and you and me, no matter how they toss the dice, it had to be. The only one for me is you, and you for me, so happy together. No matter how they toss the dice, it had to be. The only one for me is you, and you for me, so happy together. So happy together. How is the weather? So happy together.
This is the Turtles that everyone remembers, but there was much more.
Top 10 hits Eleanor, It Ain't Me, Babe, and You Showed Me, and the story of how a bunch of guys from Westchester High School in Los Angeles became one of America's top bands.
We met Bob Dylan, we met the Beatles, and we even played the White House.
But while everyone knew our hits, nobody really knew what it was like to be a turtle.
It all started from humble beginnings as a neighborhood surf band. Sit back, watch.
They were unique. All four of them were different and unique. The quietest one, in my memory, would be Al Nichols. He was the quietest, at least in my class he was. Chuck was the sportsman, the swimming star. Mark was the clown. Howard was the sort of stability of the force. Howard had a fabulous voice for a young man of 16 or 17 at the time.
Choir probably added a dimension to us as a local band of singers that a lot of the other bands didn't have as a part of their career, even in high school. Was we learned about part singing. We learned that you could put different people on different notes, and we didn't really understand music that well at the time to know exactly what we were doing, but we knew that we could add different notes and sing in parts because we were singing already in parts in a cappella choir.
I've always been attracted to funny people, so when he asked about joining the group, especially when he answered that he had no particular skills at all, I was sold. You know, I thought the band could really use this guy and a little levity, something to lighten up the situation, because it was not a happy band. It was a band that was concentrating on the music, on getting it right, and having Mark in the band, it just turned into a fun situation.
Mark would get up on stage and he'd sing a couple of duets with Howard. You know, this is the early days of the Crossfires, and Al would go, "Well, that's real nice." And Howard would keep pushing for Mark to be a permanent member, and Al would say, "Absolutely not. This guy doesn't play an instrument. I'm not going to pay him."
We were a surfing band, so essentially we were playing pretty much about 90% instrumental music, and I had picked up a saxophone at kind of the demand of my father that I begin making the same amount of money as the rest of the guys. We kind of honked our way through the hits of the late 50s and early 60s, which was at the time pretty much Dick Dale and the Deltones and the Safaris and the Rhythm.
I don't know about Mark, but for my own self, I had zip personality. I mean, I poured myself into the books and stuff, and I did pretty well in school, but as far as my social life, you know, I was a leper. You know, and therefore, after the Crossfires became a big band, and all of a sudden I was into my second year of high school, and people were going, "Yo, rock and roller!" It wasn't so much, "Yo, Neil Sedaka-looking nerd." You know, it was more like being accepted by your peers and beyond accepted, to the point where you were just sort of a local celebrity.
We worked with the Turtles at the Revel Air Club. They were the headliners, and we got to play one gig with the Turtles in Redondo Beach as Rick and the Ravens. They all had matching suits. Everyone had, as I recall, the Turtles all had matching suits. But then as Rick and the Ravens, we all had matching suits too. So everyone had matching suits. Everyone was a surf band at the time.
We wanted to be the Beatles so bad. We knew we couldn't be the Beatles because everybody knew what they looked like, but we knew we could get away with being Jerry and the Pacemakers because nobody knew what they looked like. So we would go into these bars and restaurants and introduce ourselves as Jerry and the Pacemakers from England. And
we all knew the names of the different guys.
We all knew the names. Freddie Marsden, my brother.
Yes.
And then we'd order white tea, please. Can we have white tea and dry toast bickies, please?
And they would look at us like, what?
You know, white tea. Take the tea with milk in it and give us a dry bicky on the side so we can dunk it, say.
Al was married with a child. Don was married with a child on the way. Al couldn't survive on the $40 or $50 a weekend we were earning as a surfing band.
We were becoming adults, and we did not know what to do. We started this rock and roll dream as high school kids, and now that we were adults and had to earn a living at it, we were between a rock and a hard place, to coin a phrase. We really didn't know what to do. Al was the guy instrumental in coming to us and saying, look, I can't live like this. We scribbled out a resignation note, and I was elected to take it upstairs to the office in the back and give it to Bill Utley, Reb Foster's cousin, explaining why we were resigning and that we couldn't afford to do this kind of thing anymore. And literally
there
on
were
the way up the stairs,
two guys had been brought in by Bill and Reb to hear us play that night, and had literally grabbed us as we were going upstairs and said that they liked the way that it sounded singing the Bird songs.
Yeah,
and all
Mr.
the
Tambourine
harmonies.
Man had just come out the week before, and we did the Bird songs, and the guy said, yes, this is great, folk rock is the new direction, come up with a few more of these, we'll take you into the studio, let's make a record. Reb Foster, brilliant disc jockey that he was, saw that the English invasion had taken a firm hold in America and said, I've had this name rattling around in my brain, how would you guys like to be the Turtles? We thought he was crazy.
We didn't
Stupid, fat, green things. We
Yeah.
laughed. We held our sides. We said,
thought he
"You're
was kind of
crazy."
making fun of us. We had picked out the name, the Six Pack and the Half Dozen and other names we thought would
English.
work for the six of us. And we thought actually the name Turtles was kind of stupid at the time because we felt that he was kind of picking on the way that we looked and the fact that
We were slow and
Yeah.
we were clunky and it wouldn't work. But he pointed out to us, not so, not so. First of all, it's an animal-sounding name. It has a T-L-E-S ending, much like the Beatles. It's going to be on a brand new label, and there were so many new labels releasing independent English stuff at the time that we would probably be mistaken for a British band, which is exactly what happened.
The records that were made in the 60s, for the large part, that were successful, were made with one group of studio musicians playing, you know, the Byrds and the Mamas and Papas and the association records that I made all had the same rhythm section on them. The Turtles were great in that they could play on their own records.
So all of a sudden, these guys from Westchester High School find ourselves signed up to join Dick Clark's Caravan of Stars and meet the tour in Chicago. We're so psyched. We can't believe this, a national tour. So we go to the Hilton Hotel, is that in Chicago?
Yes.
And we're meeting all the people we're about to tour with. Tom Jones is on this tour, Peter and Gordon and the Shirelles and Billy Joe Royal and Ronnie Dove and
Brian Hyland.
an endless list of stellar 60s figures to us, and we're so impressed. It's unbelievable. The first night we join the tour, we check into the hotel. Our guitar player, Al Nickel, goes to the park just to look at the hotel and go, gosh, it's great to be on the road. He gets mugged. He gets mugged, hit over the head. All his money is taken. He comes back. Chuck Ports gets into a fight with the veterans of foreign wars who have a convention in the hotel. We're the only long-haired weirdos there. He gets into a fight on the stairway with them.
They surrounded us immediately and called us slime and sluts. And when they were done drinking that night, they'd come back down and shoot us.
It's a nightmare. It's a horror show. We haven't even played our first gig yet. And we get onto the tour bus. We're escorted to our newly assigned seats in the back of the bus, the hip place to be.
With a broken air conditioner.
Now they lead us back to these seats in the back of the bus, and we notice with great glee that we're paired up with our idols. You know, that I'm getting to sit next to Gordon Waller from Peter and Gordon, and Mark's sitting next to Tom Jones, the star of the show. And it's
right behind each other.
It's unbelievable. We're going, how did we luck out? How did we get these great seats? And then we figured it out. When the sun set that night and Tom and Gordon wanted to spread out on their seats, they kind of both looked at us and went, we said, well, what?
Like we should know. And we were told at the time by both of them that we were fortunate enough to have our own place to sleep, which was on the floor. Between the seats, there was just enough room for somebody to lay out and stretch out on the floor. And I remember very vividly laying on my floor area, looking under the seat in front of me, and there's Howard facing back, and we're kind of scrunched up with...
We waved to each other. We were learning from the best, man. We were learning from experts. We were seeing after a show Tom Jones go up to the window of the bus, and all these screaming girls, and they couldn't hear him. He was talking through the glass.
Oh, you love me, darling.
Oh, darling, you'd love to suck on Wendell, wouldn't you? Oh, he's getting a rise out of you there. You with the tits. Oh, show us your tits, darling. Oh, look at Wendell. Oh, he's a big boy now. He's growing. Oh.
And we really were shocked at the openness of the people on this tour. There was no doubt about it.
It was rock and roll. We were high school kids. We had no idea this was rock and roll. We just saw it as incredible fun. We ended the show with It Ain't Me, Babe. For his benefit largely, and also it was our biggest hit at the time. And we were paraded by him like it was the Queen, and it was some sort of a royal introduction. And everybody in the band shook his hand, and Bob was comatose. I mean, by all purposes.
Dark glasses, right at the time, were his big thing. The
dark glasses,
subterranean.
laying down in a dish of pasta, I think, was his big thing.
He was like all bent over, kind of shaking out of this
Bob,
cloud.
you don't remember this night, but we all filed by you, and we shook your hand, and I was one of the last guys up there, if not the last guy up there, and you shook my hand, and you looked up from your stupor, and you said, "That last song was great, man. You ought to record that thing. That's a..."
Voice impersonation.
And he was gone.
That was a
Right,
voice
celebrity voice impersonation, and he was right back into his pasta again with cheese on his face. We were going, "Gee, Bob, you wrote that song. Don't you remember? We already had a hit with that song.
It was kind of a shock for us to see that happen.
Please don't mistake me or try to make me the shadow of anybody else. I ain't the him or who you think I am. I'm just trying hard to be myself. Oh, society's goal is to be part of the whole. It may sound good to you, not to me. Let me be nothing like I want to. Let me be. That's all I ask of you. I am what I am, and that's all I ever can be. Don't try to change me or rearrange me to satisfy the selfishness in you. I'm not a piece of clay to mold to move each day, and I'm not a pawn to be told how to move. I'm sorry, I'm not the fool you thought would play by your rules, but to each his own philosophy. Let me be nothing like I want to. Let me be. That's all I ask of you. I am what I am, and that's all I ever can be. I say that's all I ever can be. I say that's all I ever can be.
We'd sit at the dinner table, mother, father, sister, and myself, and then we'd throw around topics, and I usually got hit from every direction. It's just years of having other people trying to change the way I was thinking. It was something that I really had said many times, as you get up and leave the dinner table, let me be to think like I want to, okay?
We suffered a lot of indignity because of the long hair, especially in the South and the Midwest, where people were very conservative. They would see the long hairs on TV, and they would probably make derisive comments about it. But the thing was, those people were on TV. When the long hairs came to their town, and all the kids in town had crew cuts, we stood out real bad. We'd go into restaurants and the whole place would go silent, and they would stare at us.
Mel Carter in Atlanta, Georgia, went into a predominantly white restaurant with him. It was a white restaurant. This was in 1965 on the same tour. And a 70-year-old man picked up his plate of mashed potatoes and gravy and beef and just threw it at him. Went down his front, and the cops came and took us away.
As a group, The Doors, we played as the house band at the Whiskey A Go-Go, which meant that we opened for the Turtles. Mark and Howard by then had gone completely over the edge. They were completely insane by then, but were holding it all in nicely. Quite obviously, they had been psychedelicized. They had the most outrageous sense of humor of any rock and roll musicians that I've ever met.
For me, the Turtles were more like the Lovin' Spoonful than they were like the Byrds. They were more, like Sebastian than they were like McGuire or something. And I always felt that because they were so nuts on stage and so nuts in the studio, that they really belonged in the good time thing as opposed to the hard protest folk rock thing. And You Baby was our first sort of experiment in moving into this kind of feel-good music, if you will.
You Baby was, for me, that was as close as I wanted to come to, at that time, to good rhythm and blues. And I was very happy and surprised. I remember the talk around the music business at the time was how the Turtles could do such a thing. I mean, it was like they turned their back on folk rock, and it was like they were going to make, they were going to alienate the people in the folk, people who loved folk, and that they had lost 60% of their audience, and And I took a brunt of that storm too.
This is the Bunker Hill section of Los Angeles. Right across the street from the Water and Power Building, you'll find a magnificent structure. That's our music center over there. And somewhere down along the sidewalk, there they are. Oh, bless you, gentlemen. Here are the Turtles.
Time I fall asleep till the morning 'cause I dream about you, baby. And I feel alright 'cause I know tonight I'll be with you, baby. And who makes me feel like smiling when the weary day is They say candy is sweet, but it just can't compete with you, baby. You got everything I need, and nobody can please like you do, baby. Nobody but you. And who believes that my wildest dreams and my craziest schemes will come a little ray of sunshine, a little bit of soul, and just a touch of magic. You got the greatest thing since rock
Playing as the Crossfires was the best time we ever had together. We double dated, we rehearsed at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. We couldn't get enough of trying out new things, of hoping and dreaming together. We were very close, very, very close. When we started doing the road shows as the Turtles, we were together so much that when we got back to Los Angeles in between tours, we'd never even see each other.
We were all friends, grew up together, and we enjoyed being with each other. But after, a certain period of time on the road, you start getting on each other's nerves, just like regular family life or anything else.
In high school, the Night Riders and the Crossfires, and even to the first year and a half of the Turtles, we were really a happy group. We did a lot of things together, but then it got more pushed, and our time was used more by the record companies and recording and tours by the agents and things like that, and we basically could never get away from each other.
My reason for leaving the band was it was a complicated conglomeration of a lot of different things that were occurring. As I'd mentioned earlier, there was friction between Al and Howard over songwriting. There was the undercurrents of all the wives and girlfriends pressuring us about whether or not we were sleeping with groupies. There was the road weariness, all the dives we were playing in, and for my own self, I always felt a pressure of trying to lift anything we did on record up to a higher artistic quality.
Of a new record company, a new group, and new management all breaking at the same time. It's too bad that we didn't all have a little bit more experience and weren't a little bit more accommodating to one another's positions.
You can try to please me, but it won't be get me, 'cause my heart is stone. You better leave me alone, yeah. You can try to please me, but it won't be easy. Stone walls surround me, I'm surprised that you even found me. And you don't stand an outside chance, you don't stand an outside chance, but you can try me. Keep on trying me, baby. Come on and show me you love me, baby. You gotta try the hard, baby. Come on, try.
Bob Beta was probably the flashiest drummer I'd ever seen. I mean, he never played anything without going twirling the sticks a few times first. I mean, he was probably the fastest guy I'd ever seen, you know, like right up there with Ginger Baker, and he was like just amazing to watch. He was an art form.
I eventually left the group because I wasn't considered part of them off stage. And if I wasn't part of them off stage, therefore I couldn't be part of them on stage. And I think I was just a product of everything we were doing. I was stressed out.
When we sorted through those stacks of records looking for that next single to cut, and stumbled upon Happy Together, and heard something in those grooves that no one else had heard, a song that had been rejected by every band that had listened to it.
The Vogues.
Yeah, the Happenings, the Tokens. I mean, people passed on this song, you just go, I don't get it.
It was a New York song. I mean, there was no doubt about it. I mean, when you heard the demo, it didn't sound like very much. The quality of the demo was really, really poor. It was just a guy on a guitar and a couple of kind of whiny singers, and one guy in the back playing on his knees. And
I can't see.
I mean, it was really terrible.
Imagine me and you, I do. I think about you day and night. It's only right to think about the girl you love and hold her tight. So happy together. If I should call you up, invest a dime, and you say you belong to me, ease my mind. Imagine how the world could be so very fine, so happy together. No matter how they toss the dice, it had to be. The only one for me is you, and you for me, so happy together. I can't see me loving nobody but you for all my life. When you're with me, baby, the skies will be blue for all my life. Me and you, and you and me, no matter how they toss the dice, it had to be. The only one for me is you, and you for me, so happy together. No matter how they toss the dice, it had to be. The only one for me is you, and you for me, so happy together. So happy together. And how is the weather? So happy together. We're happy together. So happy together. So
you know, I'd be playing, getting ready to play drums, and Jake, our lead guitar player, we'd be trying to tune up. He'd go, and he'd go, shh, shh. He'd tell me to shh, because I was ready to play, and he'd say, shh, shh, and he'd go, so then after that gig, my dad lived about 35 miles out of Boston, and I didn't sleep much that night, and I went out to see him early Sunday morning. It was too early to go to his house, so I went to the Park Street Diner in Ayer, Massachusetts, and I was having breakfast Sunday morning, and it just came to me, and then it came from
to arrange the vocals and to play bass. Chip Douglas was there. I really do believe that he was primarily responsible for the Turtles' arrangement of that song. He got us out into the road with it, and we woodshedded it in front of the audience.
He was actually a member of our touring band playing out on the road, but I think Chip saw something bigger for himself waiting at the end of this, because as soon as he cut Happy Together as the bass player and had been on the road for 7 or 8 months as a part of our touring band in those cars, that was it for Chip. He had his demo, so to speak, for his next part of his career.
I actually think it took the Vietnam guys returning home to tell us about their experiences and how that song helped get them through the war, and how they would be alone at night in a foxhole and hear those lyrics and be able to imagine me and you. I do. It wasn't a song about two people together. It was a song about a person dreaming he was with an unattainable love at the time, and that brought them home. They imagined themselves happy together with their girlfriends, and it helped get them through the war. We had no idea. I mean, we really thought it was a light, frothy, mysterious but very poppy song. You know, we liked it on those merits. We weren't looking for hidden meanings or subtleties there.
There were no head trips going on.
No, when you say how is the weather, that's not exactly subtle. That's sort of a flying mallet. So the fact that kind of crept through and sort of added a sense of humor to the way the Turtles were to be perceived from then on was also a nice little foothold in pop that has aided.
And it kind of set up the type of material that writers such as Gary Bonner and Alan Gordon were now able to conjure up. When Imagine Me and You lyrically set up what would become our next hit record, She'd Rather Be With Me, which was another twist on the love affair romance of some guy pointing out to this other guy that your girl likes me more than she likes you. It was another kind of tongue-in-cheek.
So as You Know What I Mean. I mean, all of those songs are, wouldn't it be great if we were both together? None of those three songs said anything about, hey, life is great being with you.
Right.
Those guys didn't feel that way because they didn't have those kind of relationships.
Mark and I drove over to meet Jim, and Jim actually had sung a hit single called Hey Joe with the Leaves, and we liked to sing, and we went over to meet this guy, and he was eating like potato chips for breakfast.
Pepsi-Cola, Turtles, take 6. 1, 2. Taste the beats the others cold. Pepsi pours it on. Anytime a thirst takes hold, Pepsi pours it on. Pepsi's got that special taste created for the cold. The cold turns on that Pepsi vibe, makes Pepsi-Cola come alive. Taste that beats the others cold. Pepsi pours it on. Pepsi pours it on. Taste that beats the others cold. Pepsi pours it on. Taste that beats the others cold.
Well, Happy Together was an international hit, and no one could have been more shocked than we were to have a record that was that big, especially in England. We were just so thrilled because that meant to us that the Beatles heard our record. We didn't care about anything else or anybody else or whether or not it sold or made money. The Beatles were hearing our record now every day of their lives.
We had no idea what to expect. All we had was this promo clip that they'd done for Happy Together.
which I guess was actually more along the lines of being one of the first rock videos. And we were so used to seeing American groups like the Byrds and the Walker Brothers and the Loving Spoonful, who were so serious with their images. They're wearing these anorexic tight jeans, and they had this perfect would-be Beatle mop-top hairdos. And then here's the Turtles, this bunch of happy-go-lucky ragamuffins, basically, in this video of them frolicking and falling about in fields full of flowers. And one guy in the Turtles was an unashamedly fat guy who had, for Christ's sake, curly hair. The first night we were there, so we were stoked, we were jazzed, and this McDougal guy, who we were just meeting for the first time, will later be part of our lives ever since, took us to this nightclub called the Speakeasy. We weren't really ready for what was to come. We went into this dark, dingy environment. It must have been 11 or 12 at night. And we entered the private entrance, down the hall, around the corner, and the first people that we saw at this little table off to the side, literally the first people we saw in the club were the Beatles.
Right, it was George, Paul, and John. And they were sitting in this kind of up, it was like a step and a half up above the rest of the club, kind of tucked in this corner. And everybody in the club kind of was always watching this area, because this was like the first place that came in. And the Speakeasy had a glass-in restaurant in the middle of this rock and roll club where you could go in and actually eat dinner.
In silence, while the noise and cacophony surrounded you. Anyway, we were led past the Beatles once again, much like Bob Dylan in a procession-like style, except that the Beatles were really drunk. At least.
Something like that.
Something like that. And they were pretty out of their minds. And come on, it was late at a nightclub and they have every right to have their fun, but we didn't know that. They were gods to us.
John was kind of falling into his table, and he had a candle in front of him, and it kept burning him, and he'd sit back up. And I was so involved watching him, and he was, that I didn't know until somebody said, you know, you're sitting next to Paul.
Bunch of girls sitting around, and Paul taking his camera and literally climbing under the table and
taking pictures up their skirts and taking candle pictures
shots
and crawling to the next table. Hello, darling. So
just kind of being, being the
buffoons.
Beatles, kind of just like Hard Day's Night, what you would imagine them to be. And
But more so, a little more out of control, we could handle it, it was okay, nice to see you, what a silly bunch of wacky guys. Well, Jim Tucker, our rhythm player, did not have the same reaction. He looked at his icons crumbling before his very eyes and said, no, man, no, don't do this to me. You're the Beatles. You're not supposed to be wacky, normal guys. You got to be the Beatles, man. Please, please.
Well, that kind of went on the next few days. You kind of noticed Jim had kind of a despondency kind of growing over him.
Some girls love to run around, love to handle everything they see. But my girl has more fun around, and you know she'd rather be with me. Oh my lucky guy is what I am. Tell you why, you'll understand. She don't fly, although she can.
the Turtles got over really well in England. I think because they had these great harmonizing voices, you know. Howard Kaylan, I still think is one of the greatest voices in rock and roll, and the blend between Howard and Marky Poo was just great. So you got these great British harmonizers like Clark Hickson Nash from the Hollies and John Paul and George from the Fabs. We're just crazy about the Turtles.
They came in to see us almost every night we played. Lennon would start out sitting in the booth and end up on the floor.
It was all we imagined London would be. There was Graham Nash, there was Donovan sitting on a rug with incense burning and big hookah pipes, hash all over the place, stoned gypsy girls twirling around in tie-dyed dresses and lace curtains. And just, it was everything you wanted it to be in 1967 in England. It was, and more.
I remember once when they came to my house in London when I'd gotten the one of the only copies of Sgt. Pepper on a reel-to-reel from George, and I sat them down in my house. I loaded up a huge pipe with some of the
coffee,
of course, some of the finest Lebanese coffee that was ever actually grown on that side of the mountain, and smoked a huge pipe and played them this album, and their reaction was, of course, the same as everyone's reaction to Sgt. Pepper. What a breakthrough album. But they were very nice. I did kind of take them under my wing because, you know, they were visitors from America and it was their first time in England.
The Beatles sitting there telling me that they liked my stuff. How much better can it get?
Brian Jones had become kind of a friend. Brian was an enormous surf music, California sound. He loved the harmony music of the 60s, all of it. And when the Turtles came over, he just was completely knocked out by us.
Yeah, he came to watch several shows. Hendrix also was a big fan, coming from the U.S. and knew who we were, and ate dinner with him a couple of times.
Brian standing in front of the stage at the Speakeasy with a camera, shooting us stills, movie camera.
Wonder where those went, huh?
Yeah, and he's got this, had this hat on and the flowered shirts, and I remember Hendrix coming to see us dressed in the exact outfit he wore on the Are You Experienced album.
I played my last job in England. Howard and I got sick, and like I said, we canceled probably 3 or 4 engagements, and we were both flat on our back. And I woke up one morning when we were feeling good, or better, and walked over to the window and took a look around and said, I'm tired, I don't want to do this anymore. And they had 2 more weeks back east before they were due back in L.A. Well, I got on a plane that day and flew back to L.A. with one of our managers.
Just come back to tell you there's a little bit of heaven underneath the apple tree. And every time I see you with that smile upon your face, it's a little bit there for me. And she's my girl, and that's what it was last night. Wait for the ride. She's my girl, took her away last night. Wait for the ride. My girl, that's what it was last night. Up in the sky. sky, that's where I was last night. My girl took me away last night. My girl, that's where I was last night. That's right. My girl took me away last night. The sky. My girl, that's where I was last night.
It was originally, she's my girl, you took her away from me.
Yeah, she's my girl, you took her away from me.
You're breaking my heart. She's my That was the key.
Didn't you know? Didn't you know?
Right?
She's my girl. I thought that was over and above the artistic level of any American group. I thought they'd really hit on something, and I was disappointed to see that after She's My Girl, they never quite hit that stride again. And I was also sorry to see that record didn't go to #1 like it should have. There was some controversy about the lyrics, mentioning morning glories, and you know, there was some rumor that people were eating morning glory seeds and getting high, and it was a drug.
There was a time where I probably thought I was the walrus. I had, you know, John Lennon's personality pretty much. Although I played the bass like Paul, I thought more like John, and a lot of my thinking ran toward their attempt to develop a higher consciousness and find out what was beyond the reality of our lives. And they were doing it through the Eastern mysticism in those days, transcendental meditation, and I dabbled in that.
Our influence of the Beatles was because they were something that every group wanted to be. I mean, to be able to make the kind of records and to be themselves was something that every group hoped to attain. We
went nuts.
Yeah, we did the same thing.
Unfortunately, I mean, we got obsessed to the point that we looked at their clothes and we wear their clothes. We would read what kind of drugs they were taking. We took those drugs. If they did a psychedelic raga, we would do a psychedelic raga. When they formed their own company and called it Apple, we formed our own company and called it Blimp.
When we got to Florida and wanted to take a week off, we went over to the Bahamas and rented motorcycles and scoured the island just like they had done.
When Apple Boutique opened in London, our wives wanted to open the Blimp Boutique on the Sunset Strip. And we scouted out locations and gave them money, and they were designing lacy frilly things.
We went in and created the Battle of the Bands. That was a tremendous spin-off of what they had set up with Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, because here they had done what people were calling a concept album. Well, we wanted to do a concept album.
Sgt. Pepper was basically a variety show, right? They presented the show. Glad you had a good time at the show. So long now.
We took it one step farther.
Yeah, we went back to our roots, you know, and the original show of shows for us was winning at these Battle of the Bands, and so we wanted to portray the music of the era as performed by the bands of the era, and so we went to Western costumes.
And each group that we created musically, when you opened the album, we wanted to portray visually, so that on the cover we're in tuxedos, kind of like the way...
Come on in, folks. Here's
just like the Beatles did, we're Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. We were now tuxedoed, saying, come in. Right, tonight the Battle of the Bands became our Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and it immediately went bringing the audience into something, and it spun off with a harp into a song called The Last Thing I Remember, which was a way of showing that this album was all drug-induced and influenced, psychedelicized.
Yeah, very Beatlesque.
To some extent, there was an ongoing crisis of identity with the Turtles. If the Turtles had really been comfortable with who and what they were, I think they would have been bigger group.
Now Howard, I considered the intellectual of the group. Howard would come over, and it was like everyone would just sit like at his feet, you know, to hear his stories. He was hysterical, and he would stay all night, and we would stay up all night and just listen to Howard talk.
I just got so fed up, sick and tired of the guys from White Whale coming to us constantly and saying, give us another Happy Together, give us another Happy. The only thing we can sell from you guys is another Happy Together. So in Chicago at the Astor Towers, in one of those decadent periods where we all had suites, I went away to my room, plugged up on something or other, and slammed the door and just said, all right, damn it, you want another Happy Together? You're going to get another Happy Together. And I went through the process of analyzing what made Happy Together work, and wherever Happy Together's chords went down, my chords went up. And whenever that melody line took that turn, my song took another. And I purposely threw in lyrics that would show the White Whale people the folly of their ways. Pride and joy, etc. was in fact at first fab and gear, etc. But the fact that anybody was using etc. in a song was pretty ludicrous. And the fact that I was singing real pre-teen lyrics about going to the movies and not being understood by this fictional girl's parents and all that stuff, I figured it was the kind of thing that the guys at White Whale would come back to me and go, what are you, out of your mind? Okay, we were wrong, thanks anyway, we don't want another Happy Together, get progressive. But they didn't get the joke. In fact, nobody got the joke. In fact, years and years later, I'm being asked to this very day if I meant to say etc. Did I know that was a funny song? Yeah, I knew it was a funny song.
You got a thing about you, I just can't live without you. I really want you, Eleanor, near me. Your looks intoxicate me, even though your folks hate me. There's no one like you, Eleanor, really. Let's go out to a movie. What do you see now, Eleanor? Can we? They'll turn the lights way down low. Maybe we won't watch the show. I think I love you, Eleanor, love me.
Sound was so big. They all sang, and I never understood, you know, what was the deal, but their harmonies were just like encompassing in that big arena. It was just gigantic, and they did all their hits. I just was stunned by the bigness of sound. They were terrific. They really made it all worthwhile. It was one of the probably the best concert I'd ever been to.
I mean, and their concerts were always very energetic. I mean, Mark and Howard have amazing voices, and they were always right on and just so happy and so, you know, so much fun. I mean, I cracked up at their concerts more than any other concerts. I remember seeing them at the Hollywood Bowl, and they did the Flying Sanzini Brothers circus act in the middle of the show, and the way that Mark and Howard would imitate other groups. I thought that was amazing. I thought they were some of the best entertainers, I think, in pop music.
The Turtles really were happy together. I mean, you know, of all the bands I've been in, they never hardly had any arguments, and they all got along good, and it was a lot of fun. We joked a lot.
Mark, he was a nutcase. I mean, one time I went to see them in Chicago, and they asked me to sit in, you know. I mean, this is kind of a normal thing to do when one group goes to see another group. Well, we wound up in a pile on the floor of the nightclub. Everybody holding their microphones, never missing a note, but in this big pile of arms and legs, kind of like a love pile. It was hysterical.
There was one instance where I had a solo tour going, and I had another singer, just as a duo, and he bowed out, and it was like a week, and so I was desperate, and I called Mark Boldman. I said, "Call Howard and see if you want. We come. It's like just 5 or 6 cities, and we want to, you know, just help." And it said, "Absolutely." So they show up, and the first gig, they come out on stage, and they've got on T-shirts that say David and Graham.
I think we had just went to #1, and I think either Mark or Howard, one of them brought in a box, a gift to me, and said, "We got a present for you." I was all excited and everything, and I opened up the box, and there was this big turtle in there, you know. I thought, what is this, you know? And then he said, use a pencil, man, and put it in front of it. I put it in front of it, and the turtle snapped the pencil right in half. It was a snapping turtle. I thought, what kind of gift is this? You know?
Spanky made at that time a devastating pot punch. Now we can talk about it. Then we couldn't.
I mean, seed, stem, everything went in.
Boil it up.
With wine and fruit juices. And she used to come over with, you know, the guys in the band, Nigel and Kenny, and the original members of the band. John Sider was the drummer. John became a very good friend.
Our drummer, John Sider, the chief, was hanging out with the Turtles a lot. I think he was interested in one of their wives. And he wormed his way into the Turtles.
We became so tight with their drummer, John Sider, that our own drummer, John Barbeta, wouldn't even come around us. He'd stay in his own room, he'd hang out by himself. He was really, by this time, either he had eased himself or we had eased him right out of a family situation, which was very, very important in the Turtles. It always was. A friendship and a feeling of camaraderie was more important than the music that we played. And case in point was our hiring John Sider, who, a wonderful human being that he is, and a real good soul singer and stuff. He was never the drummer that Johnny Barbeta was. He was never hired to be. He was hired because he fit in so well with us that it was like he was already family. So we sat around for days and days trying to figure out who should produce our next record if we had our druthers, and big names were being dropped around. I mean, we're talking George Martin and, you know,
everyone
Ray
was,
Halley. I mean, just giant producers in the business. If you have your pick of, you know, the biggest of the big.
That was the way we did a lot of things, was just envision
what if. And so we all came to the conclusion that if we really had our choice, the guy that we'd like to have produce the record was Ray Davis of the Kinks. He had just produced Village Green Preservation Society. It was a fantastic album. We loved it. We knew every word of it. We could all sing it. And we believed not only in what he was saying, but the purity in which he was saying it.
It's night, Halloween, but the light comes out in city lights. And where am I? Somewhere with you, and I don't know the reason why. Don't get it wrong, we just happen to sing a whole different song. Right, but there's something wrong here. wispy space. I'm paralyzed without a time, without a place. Inside of me, where no one's ever been and you will ever be. And I gotta say that there's just room for one, so you must go away. I know you tried, but this is my world somehow, somewhere Friday night but there is something wrong here, somewhere Friday night. Tonight, tonight, tonight,
We received an invitation. First, we had read an article in Red Book or one of
Teen, I
these
think it was
teen
Teen
magazines.
magazine.
Tricia Nixon, the president's daughter. It was an interview with her, and she'd listed her likes and dislikes. And when it got to her favorite music, her favorite band was the Turtles. Well, hard to believe. We couldn't believe it. We certainly politically were not aligned with the Nixon administration at all. So that when several weeks later our management company received hand-engraved invitations to play the White House, the band took it very negatively. And management looked at it just the other way. They said, hey, look, this is not a political thing you're doing. This is like performing before the Queen. You do it because you're an American. You don't do it because you disagree or agree with the guy's politics.
And
it's just a gig.
He wasn't even there. I mean, it was called Tricia Nixon's Masked Ball. The Turtles were met at the airport, and each member of the band was put into a car with a driver and a
American flag on the front.
and security.
God,
each member had his
great.
own. We went to the White House where they had dossiers on each member of the group in a holding lounge where each member had his own dossier, and so they checked against you with the dossier.
And they were unloading the equipment into the front door of the White House, and they brought in all the amplifiers, and they brought in the drums, and they were bringing in the drum trap case where the snare drum goes and the drumsticks and all of those things. And as they were picking it up, they kind of picked it up sideways or something because they were Secret Service guys, security, not really equipment handlers. And so in the trap case getting turned upside down, inside the trap case they set off the metronome combination guitar tuner.
These guys thought it was a bomb. They went crazy.
They grabbed everybody and
cleared the area, drew guns.
They put us up against the wall.
They had some other guy go in there like he was a commando and lift the thing out and start examining it. And as he was examining it, he touched the button that sent out the A, the 440A tuning tone.
And
that was it.
That was everybody went.
Hit the dirt! The guy was trampled on it, they stomped on it.
They had it still standing up against the wall. Nobody was moving. About 10 minutes later, they came back with it. It was soaking wet. The front plate had been all peeled off, and they gave it back to us. They said, it's a metronome. Well, we told them, well, yeah.
So they gave us a check,
Sorry.
actually, which would be kind of nice to have today, because I know we never...
It was like $7 or something?
I think it might have been a little more, but it would have been a real nice thing to have for history.
Quite a memento. Anyway, the party itself was pretty raucous, and the kids were pretty wild, and they allowed us to get pretty wild. In fact, we were 3 sheets to the wind by the end
Oh,
of the
yeah.
evening?
One of the great things about it, the people were really nice. They gave us complete run of the White House. We were allowed to go anywhere we wanted in the White House except the private quarters upstairs. And other than that, we could go anywhere
Yeah.
without guards or
They
security.
gave us the Lincoln Library for
As a
our
dressing
dressing room,
room, yeah.
and boy, did we use that library for things other than Mr. Lincoln would have intended.
And at the party that evening, in a kind of a, I was a little bit higher than probably I should have. I know that I made a play for Lucy Baines Johnson that almost got me into a tremendous fight with her husband.
We were on the road about 80% of the time in those years. We'd be out on the road for 3 or 4 weeks at a time and be home maybe for just a week, sometimes not even that, just long enough to change clothes, turn in the money, get new contracts, and leave again.
We were still under contract to White Whale, the company who we did an audit of and discovered they had literally taken hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of ours.
For
no
over, yes,
kidding.
1 6-month period, we found a discrepancy of about $160,000, and multiplied that times 5 years. We felt if they were skimming that kind of money off the top of our 1 6-month period, which was not a very successful part of our career, what laid out there. So our lawyer slapped a lawsuit on White Whale.
They released Eve of Destruction from our 1965 album as a single, and we had no idea what the hell was going on. So before everything just went totally nuts,
We had a
tried
meeting.
to make a deal with them, whereby we said, look, you guys, this isn't working. Can we just at least leave a good taste in the mouth of the American public and give them one more single, one more record that will represent some quality involved with the Turtles? We want to leave it on a positive note.
This was one of the great nights in Turtle history. We were at a dude ranch shooting this video in Wickensburg, Arizona, dude ranch, and we really got into the roles. For this video, might not show it, but we dressed up probably like the Eagles were, remember on the Long Riders album they did, and we were wearing all of the guns tied to our legs. And the night before, we stayed up in this dude ranch living room where they had this huge round table, and we had taken LSD because
Played
here
poker. It was one of those nights.
and
yeah.
whiskey and shot glasses and playing poker and dressed up like cowboys.
Just getting into it, the drawl.
We had been up all night. We had taken copas. I mean, being out in the desert, and here this was just.
We were one with nature. And then they hired these 5 models to also go on horseback with us, like my horse and her horse were to meet, and we were to walk down the hill together, kind of nice, like romantic. I don't remember the video ever looking romantic. It looked like a bunch of stupid people on horses wondering what the hell.
The outtakes of this video would be hilarious because
the horse I was on tried to roll me 4 times. The guy finally looked under the saddle and said, "Dude, look at the burr under there. My God, the size of a magnet."
It took all day to shoot 3-minute video because none of us knew how to ride and we're completely stoned, and we'd been up all night, and these people are trying to direct us, and trying to direct us.
All right,
is
horse
one thing.
number 3. Sure, babe. I'll kick him and see what he does, all right?
And you're trying to direct us on this 3,000-pound animal or something, and you've got to meet with these other people. It was one of the most hilarious evenings and afternoons.
While you sit and seek a crescent moon is laying at your feet with hope that's made of sand. You don't think you can, but you have held it all in your hands. I've been trying hard to keep from needing you, but from the start my heart just rolled and flowed. I've seen where it goes, still somehow my love for you grows. Lady-O. So on my heels I'll throw wings, gonna ride silver strings, but I'll see you in my holy
What a lot of people don't know is the Turtles were in lawsuits from 1966 to 1974.
We trusted everybody, we believed, and we'd sign anything.
Here's a brief description of the managerial problems faced by a rock and roll band, us. Here's what happened. First of all, our first manager came along. He's the guy who owned the nightclub, remember him?
Yeah.
He convinced us he was good by telling us, I'm your manager.
We signed.
We believed
Good
him.
enough for us. Manager number one, now we got a manager.
We went out on the road with this guy right here.
Call him 2.
We'll call him number 2. He told us that manager number 1 was no good.
He said he was a crook. Said manager number 1 hated us, stole our money, never wanted to see us again, so he said, what should we do, sign with you? Yeah.
So we believed
We signed
him.
with number 2.
We went to our record company and we borrowed $250,000. We paid manager number 1 $50,000 of our money. Our money. Cash. We promised manager 1 5 payments of $50,000. Manager number 2 now, we're really poor, we're out on the road. He takes our contract and sells it to a company in New York and told us it was a new agency. We believed him. There was no agency.
No. So he gave us that money, told us it was an advance, but it wasn't an advance. It was the other money.
He sold them 50% of our managerial contract, and then we didn't make the next payment on our loan. Remember the loan?
Default.
So number 1 now is suing us right about this time for $2.5 million because we owe him money. So now we don't like number 3, a bunch of swarthy geeks from New York.
guys.
And number 2, of course, has run off to Mexico.
With our bass player's wife and $40,000 of tour money.
Wife, money, Mexico, down here. And we are with a new road manager who tells us that number 3 is really bad. We already know that.
We hate 3 anyway.
So we sign with manager number 4. We're now with manager number 4, and he brings in a lawyer.
Let's just call her lawyer.
And she's really bad for us. She ruins our career really bad, as if we needed help.
Can we just reiterate? Manager number 1 still suing us.
$2.5 million. So now we're out on the road with a new guy. He tells us manager number 4 is not doing anything good. Manager 4 goes up north, and we sign with manager number 5. If I've got this right, we're still being sued. $2.5 million. Manager number 6 comes in. Big managers.
Big company, a big TV star, still a big TV star.
Very successful.
Famous, like number 1 show, kind of a TV star.
We hate them. We leave them. We leave them and we go with 2 guys.
2 of those guys we didn't hate. We
stayed with them.
Were good.
They became manager number 7. Let us again point out.
Suing us.
Still all the way over here.
Manager number 7 were pretty good. They brought us to the White House and
That's
stuff.
right.
We had a good run, but then you know what? We hated them.
We didn't like them anymore. They had dogs. Right over here.
Remember number 3.
We settled with manager number 3. We give him $25,000 cash.
Manager number 1 is still suing.
$2.5 million. So we come over here, but also manager number 1 is very popular now.
Got big on our money.
On money. The $50,000. So we come back to, we'll call it number 8 guy, number 1 manager.
We call him up and say, hey, you were always the guy. We love you, man.
He throws out the lawsuit because now we're friends. We become his new group, and then
we break up.
Well, back then it was great because, I was 21, 22 years old and had a great car, had all the material things I wanted, had money in the bank. And for me, at that age, I just couldn't believe it. It was like the heart of our career as the Turtles, and we were successful. We were doing a lot of TV. Everybody knew who we were, and Mamas and Papas lived down the street from us, and Jim Morrison used to hang out with us, and all the local LA groups, and the Birds, and the Monkees, and I used to give Mickey Dolenz drum lessons, and it was a pretty tight-knit little thing down there, and it was incredible. It really was. What happened in the 60s is never going to happen again.
If we'd kept having hit records, we probably wouldn't have started looking at each other and finding faults with ourselves.
I never looked at myself as the head or a head Turtle. I just always looked at it like I was the singer in the band. I always gave way to Al's superior musical knowledge or to a group vote of any kind. Every once in a while, I guess I would exercise some sort of a veto power. In the early days, Chuck Ports used to call me the King Penguin, because I strutted around the stage and the rehearsal halls. In fact, like I knew what was happening and everybody else just better keep it down. But it was strictly a facade. I mean, I really felt, by and large, in the Turtle years, quite helpless out there alone. I mean, yeah, I was singing and I was fronting a band, but that was the band. And I think probably deep down psychologically, I knew that physically I had no business being there. I wasn't Peter Noon. I wasn't Mark Lindsay. I wasn't any frontman who was going to be on the cover of any Gloria Stavers publication. I wasn't the pretty boy. So there was a little Van Morrison kind of a thing going on with me, I felt. It wasn't a pretty picture. So I tried to make up for it in other ways, you know, like singing my ass off.
It taught me about commitment, it taught me about responsibility, and when I was married at the age of 19 years old, I needed both of those things because I didn't have them all through high school. I had no commitment and no responsibilities, and the Turtles gave me all of those things. It taught me about getting up off the ground at the lowest points and trying to get back to the top. It taught me about humility and how to deal with people in our most successful of times, so that I wouldn't be thought of as somebody who relied on their success for friendship and for anything else other than it becoming my work. It taught me the ethics of work.
You showed me how to do exactly what you do, how I fell in love with you. Oh, it's true. Oh, I love you. You showed me how to say exactly what you say in that very special way. Oh, it's true. You fell for me too. And when I tried it, I could see you fall. And I decided it's not a trip at all. You taught it to me too, exactly what you do, and now you love me too. Oh, it's true. We're in love, me too. Exactly what you do, how I fell in love with you. Showed me how to say exactly what you say in that very special way. You taught it to me too, exactly what you do, and now you love me too.